So in today's video I'm going to spend every hour of daylight here at Rainham Marshes. Now I'm starting off here on the seawall, partly because the reserve's shut, but there's been lots of fieldfares and stuff up here recently, and there's an outside chance of a shorted owl or a barn owl, so let's see what we can see. There were a few fieldfare about on the bushes near the visitor centre. This one posed briefly. And on the frosty seawall, this blackbird was hopping about. As I moved further along the seawall, there was a bigger flock of fieldfares. Some allowed me near enough to use the 3000mm equivalent reach of my setup for some close-ups. And I managed to get one feeding on some berries. Well, trying to feed anyway. It was a beautiful, if very cold morning, and I walked up to Aveley Bay, hopefully to see an owl that was out late hunting from the night before. Well, this wind's pretty cold, so I put my hood up. No sign of any owls, sadly, but I did see this curlew. It was feeding away on the mud that had recently been exposed by the falling tide. And I walked a bit further back along the sea wall, and the tide's going down, and these avocets have appeared. There were about 10 or so feeding in a loose group. And it was wonderful to watch them feeding so close to the shore. Avocets, the birds that are the logo of the RSPB, feed using a unique method among our wading species, sweeping their slightly open, upturned bill from side to side through the water and grabbing any small crustacean they come across. And I was pleased to get some nice slow motion footage of this. Eventually, as the tide fell further, some started to stop for a rest. Now moved down onto the original seawall, and the tide's going down, and there's a whole bunch of ducks and waders down here. So I'm going to see what footage I can get. This common redshank was searching the mud for prey. It seemed to catch a few smaller items before it pulled up this long fin creature, which is probably a lugworm or small ragworm. There were some widgeon in the shallows, and a pair of teal in the mud too. But I carried on along the old seawall to look for rock pipits, when this female teal landed right in front of me. She called out a loud quack, which on the mic was drowned out by the strong wind, and flew off to join her mate on the water nearby. A bit further along the seawall, I did find my rock pipit target. Perched on a rock just long enough for a close-up before it took off. But it didn't go far, and I could still film it from where I was already set up as it started foraging for prey among the seaweed. Until I lost it among the rocks. A pied wagtail then landed at the base of the seawall. It too was looking for insects and other invertebrates to eat. But as I filmed it, a second rock pipit landed right in front of me, so close I struggled to fit it in and keep it in focus as it ran along the bottom of the seawall. It ended up right near the pied wagtail, amongst the rocks and rubbish that sadly litter the banks of the Thames. After filming the rock pipit and pied wagtail some more, I decided to head to the reserve. But then a flock of fieldfares landed in one of the bushes. The wind was so strong, they were practically hovering as they landed. They fed on the berries for a few seconds before they took off and landed on a bush near the path, where a passing jogger flushed them again. I hung around for a bit and they came back down to a bush a bit nearer, and I was able to get some closer in footage of them feeding. These fieldfares have travelled from Scandinavia to feed on these berries, but some of the berries were obviously not up to scratch and they dropped them. Despite the fact it was a reasonably sized flock, the grey skies and the dense twigs made getting a nice bit of footage a bit tricky. But eventually one came down low enough and at the end of a branch for my best footage of them. I eventually made it into the reserve without being distracted again. Well, I've now come into the reserve proper and I'm going to head to the first hide. Almost straight away I got shouted at by a robin, which grabbed a berry and flew off. Well, I popped into the Ken Barrett hide and it's completely frozen over, so I am heading back towards the Purfleet scrape hide. I went into the Purfleet hide and the water was still partly frozen over, but there were a few ducks about. This group of widgeon and a lone shoveler were tucked up asleep on the ice, and a pair of little grebes swam out in front of this feeding pintail. Some of the widgeon flew off to a nearby field to graze. And this lone curlew was set out on its own in the middle of the scrape. This little grebe seemed to be diving and hunting under the ice. While some of the ducks seemed okay on the ice, others seemed to struggle a little, slipping around as they tried to walk. But these shovelers were comfortable enough to doze off. It was nice to see so many pintails, a really quite handsome species, with those long tails on the mouths. For most of the morning, there was one feeding somewhere on the scrape. Or like this one, having a preen. Every so often, some of the widgeon would take off and join the big flock on the field. But then something spooked them and they all flew back onto the scrape. With them all now swimming around on the scrape, I tried to capture the sound of the widgeon whistling. I captured some closer in widgeon calling at each other too. Much of the flock then headed back to the field. I made some slow motion footage of some of the stragglers. Everything in this video was filmed using what I call my 3000mm setup, which I fully explain in the video I've put a link to below. And this setup let me get in close enough to film this snipe even though it was on the far bank, and this bathing lapwing and starling right out on the scrape. And of course this marsh harrier as it came in over the scrape. This caused a bit of panic with the ducks and waders, but they soon flew back after the harrier had left. Though it spooked the coots enough to make them leave the fields and head to the relative safety of the water. I managed to capture the kestrel hovering against the dull sky before I had a break for lunch. When I came back, a pied wagtail was skating around. It was pecking at the ice, presumably picking up insects that got stuck there. There wasn't much else different from the morning. These shovelers came in closer. The numbers of pintail had increased and they were feeding along the bank. And this widgeon was having a preen. While another washed. There were some nice ice skating pied wagtails in the hide there, but not much else different from this morning, so I'm going to chance having a wander through the reserve. I've been warned there's not much about elsewhere, but just going to see what we can find. There's not much about, so I'm actually going to go back to the centre and go out onto the seawall and see what I can find. I think I'm going to stay down on the leeward side, stay out of the wind a bit. Well, I was walking along the seawall and I spotted the kestrel hovering away off. Then it came hovering quite closely, just in time for my battery to die. Well, I got these couple of quick clips. So I've come up onto the seawall and the plan was to look for some short-eared owls. Now, a bit of history. This is my 4th or 5th attempt at doing this. Every time I've come here, the sun has disappeared and the wind's picked up. And right on cue, what little sun there's been has disappeared and the wind has picked up. A week ago, I went to Sandwich, a reliable site for them, and saw none. And it was cloudy and horrible all day. It was sunny with 3 owls flying around where I'm standing right now. I don't think I've got much chance today. I could see the avocets again, and this shell duck, but no owls. Well, I've been here a good half hour. Seen a few waders and ducks off in the distance. Got a few weird looks from people wondering why I'm standing here freezing my bits off. But no sign of any owls yet. I think my jinx with owls and waxwings is going to continue for another day. But it's still 20 minutes, half hour till sunset, so let's see what happens. I was about to give up hope when this landed on a salt marsh in front of me. A short-eared owl. It was well camouflaged and I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't seen it fly in. I waited with the small crowd that had gathered, but it just got darker and darker and the owl stayed put the whole time. I can't say I blame it in this cold, harsh wind. So I headed home. Not the best footage, but I'd seen my first short-eared owl in a few years. And a mass of really nice wildlife footage from the day. And if you've got this far, well done. This is probably my longest video and edit yet. I've finally got a short-eared owl. As you can see, it is now basically dark, the sun has set. I've done sunrise to sunset as I planned, and I ended with a short-eared owl. What a good way to end. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like, drop us a comment if you feel like it, and do subscribe. It all helps with you know, getting the video out there and stuff. Give it a share as well if you know anyone that would enjoy it. And thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Bye for now.